Hi everybody, and welcome to the Pear Necessities. I'm Bear, and this week we are going to be making lemon honey pear crumble. We haven't really tried any of the fall flavors yet, and so I wanted to try something that was more traditional for a fall or winter dish, like a crumble, warm spices, fruit, things like that, but give it a little bit of a summer flair with pears, because at least in this part of Texas, things like Bartlett pears are perfectly in season. They're a really light fruit. They don't add a huge amount of heaviness to any dish, even with all the extra like the oatmeal and flour and things like that when you're adding to the crumble. So they stay fairly well up there, and it's similar to a cobbler, a little bit, tiny bit, and it's great with ice cream, so even better. I know our days right now are stretching up into the 100 mark, around 40 degrees Celsius for those of you who use logic in your temperatures. So it's getting toasty. We don't want anything that's going to be too much for our bodies. So for the lemon honey pear crumble, you're going to need 5 medium pears. This week I'm actually using Anjou pears. I found them at the store. They're one of my favorites, them and Bosque, just because they have a really thin, really light skin and a very soft, luscious, sweet flesh. They don't have a lot of texture on the inside. They're kind of buttery. I've already gone ahead and added a little bit of seasoning into here because it's going to save us some time. All that's in here is a teaspoon of cinnamon. So there we go. With your pears, though, you're going to need the juice and zest of 1 lemon. Mine was a lot juicier than I imagined it would have, and I actually got almost 1/3 of a cup of lemon juice, which is fine. It's going to be delicious. But you only want maybe 3 or 4 tablespoons, so maybe 1/4 cup. So shoot a little lower, get a smaller lemon. I saw this one, and it was the smallest, and it was still the size of my fist. So, yeah, they're getting happy here too. You will need 1/4 cup of honey, or you can use agave if you're vegan and don't eat honey. So there's that. So a liquid sweetener. This is all going into the pears. For the crumble, you need 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. I'm actually using 1/4 cup of whole wheat because I want that texture and that nuttiness that you get from it, as well as 1/2 cup of just regular old oatmeal. This is old-fashioned oats, so it's just the rolled oats. It's not the quick cooking. They would be fine. They're just a lot softer, and so they can go a little bit mushy, which some of us like. In here, thank you, oven. My oven is preheated. Remember, preheat, 350 degrees. That's what the little graphic says. In here, I have 1/8 of a cup of granulated sugar, 1/8 of a cup of brown sugar. You can just do 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. I just like the brown sugar mixed into this. It gives it a little bit more of that flavor that I really enjoy. We've discussed this before. Molasses is one of my favorites. And then also 1/2 teaspoon of salt, just mixed into this. I also have the rest of my spices in here. And in here I have 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and it's just regular Saigon cinnamon. It's very good, very sweet, and it doesn't have a lot of heat, so we need that floralness. I have 1 teaspoon of ground ginger. You can use fresh in this, but make sure that goes into the pears, not into the crumble. The ground ginger gives it that nice spice without adding a lot of wetness. And then I also have 1/8 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. Nutmeg packs a punch. This is not a big dish, so we don't need a whole lot of it. And this was fresh nutmeg, so it gives a little bit more. If you have nutmeg in a jar, just maybe use 1/4 teaspoon. You'll need a little bit more. That's fine, just to get that nice spice to it. And then I also added one of my favorite spices that's not really required, but it's one of those I like to add it because it adds something extra to me, is grains of paradise. I added one full teaspoon of ground grains of paradise. I've talked about them a little bit before, but I've never really shown them. So grains of paradise are these little guys right here. They are related to pepper. They are a pepper plant, and they have this lemony, spicy flavor. Their smell is delicious. It has a mix of clove and lemon just in the smell, or allspice and lemon, if you want to look at it that way. And then once they're ground, which I try to keep them ground, I actually use a lot of them, so I go through freshly ground pretty fast. Once they're ground, you really pick up that spiciness from them, especially that lemon, almost verbena flavor to it, as well as some of the other spices. Some people use grains of paradise instead of any other spices whenever they're making things like pumpkin pie, which we will discuss in November. It actually is part of my recipe, just using those. So those are in there as well. But again, those are mine. The Anjou pear, I actually left one because I had a request on Facebook. I was talking to some people and I was like, what would you like to see? And they said, basics? Like how to prepare fruit for things. And I was like, oh, really? So let's do that. I have this pear. I just cut it in half. I already took the stem off. That's easy enough. You twist and it pops right up. So I cut it in half. And I cut that half into half so we have wedges, and that way we can actually core it. Some people like to go through and just cut the core out like this and then slice it. I just find this slightly faster, so that's why I do it. And these pears have a very tiny core. They don't have a lot of seeds or anything, so it doesn't take much to get all of that out. Cut this one in half. Because what we're going to be doing is slicing fairly thin. It doesn't have to be perfect. They don't have to be perfectly even. You don't need that kind of pressure. Not right now, not ever. Not in the kitchen. The kitchen is for pleasure, not for torture. So you just take your time, but you don't have to do them perfectly. And you're just going to put the pear like that way. It's a little wedge, as you see. You're going to lay it flat on the little wedge, and you're going to cut on each side just to get the little extra high parts, and then you can just continue all the way across until you have all your little slices. And they're fairly even, but they're not perfect. I could do them more evenly. Am I gonna? No. This is one of those desserts that you can throw together. Say you've eventually got people coming over to your house at some point in the future. We're hoping before 2022, but we'll see. Say you've got people coming over, or you just have a family already in the house and you need something that's kind of quick, easy, but super delicious. This is one of those desserts. You just kind of throw everything together and it's good to go. So again, you don't have to have perfect slices. And let's just finish slicing up this last little wedge, and we can move on to the crumble. Alrighty, let's just get those in the bowl with everybody else and move that out of the way. I also forgot to mention, for the crumble, you need a tablespoon of cold butter. Because we are going to be cutting the butter in. I've been keeping my butter in the fridge, but big fridge. So I have to go grab it. It's rather warm in my kitchen, so I wanted to keep it cold. I'll be right back. All right, so I'm back with butter. Went ahead and I cut it up into small chunks. It was fairly well set, so I needed it to be a little bit smaller in order to be able to cut it in. To cut in butter, you need a fork. If you have a food processor, that's great. You don't want to use it at this point, just because it will cut up the oatmeal a little bit too finely. If you have a lot of manual dexterity issues, though, and using a fork is going to be kind of difficult, I know some of my viewers do. Some people in my home do. so this is a consideration we always try to take, is you can go ahead and use a food processor, like if you have one of the little ones, whatever size you have, but only do the flour with the butter, cut it in until it's nice and grainy like sand, and then in a bowl you're just going to mix in the oats and it'll work just the same. But into here, I've already got my tablespoon of butter, and this is salted butter because this dessert needs that punch. There's so much sweet going on, it needs the punch of salt to kind of help you compensate. And add my 1/4 cup of whole wheat flour and my oatmeal into here. And we're just going to start cutting it in, which means you're going to take the tines of your fork and press the butter through while you press it into everything in the bowl. And it just breaks the butter up into tiny little pieces. It's similar to how we did the butter for our biscuits, if you'll remember that when we were cutting it in. It's the same principle. It's going to be a little bit more difficult this way because of the oatmeal, but you want the oats to be part of the butter mélange, if you will. It doesn't have to be crazy small either. Like, you don't have to do it super perfectly, because again, perfection is not key in the kitchen. But it does need to be not in big old chunks. So now I'm just kind of mushing it along the sides. All right, so now we've got chunks. The oats kind of decided to laminate together, that's going to make life easier for me, honestly. So now we've got that. It's all broken up pretty well. We are going to add our sugar and spices. We're just going to stir that in. You don't have to do much with it from there. However, it has revealed a few more pockets where the butter was still kind of chunky. All right, so we've got the crumble taken care of. Let's get to our pears. Now, like I said, this is several tasty, tasty pears, all sliced up fairly thinly. And I've already put in a teaspoon of cinnamon into them, just because otherwise there's not a lot of spices or seasonings that go into the fruit itself. Into here, we're going to go ahead and put our lemon juice and the zest of the lemon, which was already in there. And I did just a fine zesting this time. I didn't do the long zest. I just did the quick little brush zest because I don't need to be able to see it, but I do need it to be able to mix in fairly thoroughly. So we've got the lemon juice in here, and I just tossed it a little bit to get the zest and the lemon juice mixed fairly well. And now we're going to add our 1/4 cup of honey. So let's get that tossed in. You don't want to overmix it at this point, especially if you're using softer pears like I am, because your pears will continue to break down. I have a baking dish. I've already sprayed it with a little bit of avocado oil. You can put this into an 8x8 little, like a square baking dish, and it'll work just fine. I like mine to be kind of thin. That way the fruit gets a better chance at cooking and caramelizing with the honey, and because I want it to be more like the cobbler and less like just a standard crumble. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop my fruit into the baking dish. All right, and onto here, we're going to, sorry about the noise, we're going to go ahead and sprinkle our crumble topping. And we'll just get this evenly coated. And if you use a smaller dish, of course, you'll have a thicker coating of the crumble topping. Okay, so you're going to get your dish into the oven. Remember, you've preheated it to 350, and if you haven't, please do now. This can sit, not gonna hurt it. And you're going to bake it for 25 to 30 minutes until the top just kind of bubbles, like you'll get bubbling from the fruit, and the top then sets from all the sugar mixing in. And once that's done, you take it out and let it cool. I'm going to get this into my oven and I will be right back. Alright, so this ended up baking right about 28 minutes. I got it to 25, checked it, still need a little bit longer, gave it 3 more, and it was perfect. And then I've let it cool for about 15 minutes just to make sure it absolutely gets a chance to set on top and that the crumble is, you know, perfectly crumbly. So let's try a little bit out. I can only take a little bit though. And then the crumble on top. Let's just get a piece of everything. You can taste that little tiny extra bit of salt that I put in. Really, it kicks in there. And the grains of paradise add a nice peppery, almost kick to it. Like it's almost got a bit of a spice, but not too much. The ginger helps as well. This is soft, it's light, it's nice and spicy. Again, great with ice cream. I don't have any otherwise, trust me. I'd have a little bit in here too. But that is absolutely delicious. The pears broke down really nicely and they just have a soft give to their flesh. The oatmeal on top is a little soft and there's some crunch from the sugar and from the flour and butter that have mixed together. And of course, all the spices together, the honey, the lemon, everything playing really well to have a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of tartness. It's a beautiful thing when you make something simple that doesn't take too long and kind of fills all those happy spaces, at least inside of me. I hope you enjoy making this recipe as much as I did today. Simple pleasures, always the best part of life. It all comes together and tastes exactly the way that I remember fall being. And until I see y'all next time, bye.